class. My name is Garrett Mills, and I am talking about my revitalization strategy, kind of going through my paper. And I did Hickory Baptist Church in Hickory, Mississippi. This was my home church where I attended for many years. And this plan was really built on a couple of things, like all of y'all's, which was the demographic study from NAM, and also the ACP reporting from the Southern Baptist Convention. And with both of those things, you could see the internal health of the church, but then also kind of see the communities surrounding the church and what are some areas that we should be looking at. And the issue that you see when you look at Hickory Baptist Church this is a church that's not simply just declining in attendance, but the overall problem is that this church really lacks disciple-making strategies to really propel the church into the future. So the problem is that attendance really declined from about 185 in 2015 to last year. Sunday morning attendance was around 125. And really after COVID, the attendance plateaued. There was not really any growth or any loss either. So it's a really big problem. But also a huge problem is that in the past 11 years or the past 10 years of ACP reporting, they've only had 40 baptisms in 10 years. And they went 3 years, 2019, 20, and 23, I believe, with 0 baptisms at all. All the while, though, the membership stayed pretty stable around 340 to 320-ish, that range for the past 10 years. So membership has stayed stable, but the problem is that participation number of attendance. Though they still are having 340 people on roll, there's only 125 coming to Sunday morning. So this means really that participation has dropped significantly over the past 10 years, and giving has been pretty stable as well. And so giving, really, if this is the case, if giving stayed the same with participation dropping, that the church is really financially supported by just a couple of people that are holding the church up. So the church hasn't lost members on paper, but what it's really lost is active and a bunch of engaged disciples. And so evangelism is inconsistent, and really we see that growth will appear when people are out evangelizing and reaching the lost, which is not going to be a problem for Hickory, because according to the demographics study, that there is nearly 47% in this community that are unaffiliated with religion. There's about 2,000 people in the community, so that means roughly half, a little less than 1,000, are unengaged, unaffiliated with any type of religion whatsoever. So the problem for the church is not an opportunity to go out and reach people, but the problem really is that the church is not going. They're not going into the harvest. And so the theological foundations for the strategy was built on, one, Christ being head of the church, right? That authority flows down from Christ as its head, and then also the Word of God being the final earthly, well, not the final earthly authority, but the Word of God being the authority that we look and see of what we need to obey. You see in 2 Timothy 3 and all the sorts of different passages. Also, membership needs to be meaningful. That if people are going to join the church, it has to mean something for them. And also that membership, it also holds accountability to the elders of the church, pastors of the church, and also in discipline and guarding the gospel. And so membership has final earthly authority. We see that in Matthew 18, particularly in that case of discipline, who had the authority to remove people from fellowship. Well, it was the local church. So also leadership, elders, deacons, they must be biblically qualified. They must be faithful. And so that's kind of the biblical grounds of where outreach and discipleship is going to flow out of. When we get those things right, that we have people obeying the Word of God, seeing Christ as the head, and qualified people leading the church into the future. So revitalization is more about reform or realignment back to Christ and the Word. And so I kind of laid the strategy out in 3 different phases. The first phase is kind of like regrounding. So you spend the first part of your time in revitalization of getting people back under the Word of God. This comes through faithful exegetical preaching. This comes on clarifying what does this mean to be a church member here. And you spend this time trying to train and evaluate maybe different leaders, people who are already in leadership roles, at making those roles clear for them and evaluating those to the Word of God. And then also, I think most importantly, in regrounding people, it's creating a culture of prayer. And this primarily comes through prayer meeting and corporate prayer that's being led, people praying for the church. So restoring gospel clarity, clear about what it means to be a healthy church and those types of things. That's really phase 1. Phase 2 is rebuilding. This is real structural change begins to happen, particularly investing in discipleship, that we create a clear discipleship pathway. There's worship, right? And then people move from worship into small groups, Sunday schools, those types of things, into serving the church, and then ultimately they move into mission. They go into outreach. And so the idea in rebuilding, is to strengthen some small group unity that from the top down, there's been vision that's been cast, making that vision clear so that small group leaders aren't left to their own to try to figure out what kind of methods we need to have while leading our Sunday schools, or what the goal is of men's group or youth group or those types of things, that leadership is unified on the vision and the direction of the church. There's also this idea that we need to reconnect youth and families to the church body. Right now at Hickory, there's this disconnect between the student ministry and the rest of the church, so you could find different ways to see that the youth are part of the church, and that the youth need to see that they are part of the overall church of Hickory. And then intentional membership care. Right now they have a ministry called Care Ministers, which is very helpful. It's the church coming in to try to see about one another, but making sure that deacons are fulfilling their role, that we can still keep care ministers, but ultimately the deacons need to be checking in on each other. And all of this is really to help create a culture of discipleship and programming people to know that these are ways that you're going to grow in your faith, coming from worship into small group, and then ultimately with the end goal of being phase 3, which is reaching. It's outward focused, right? That we train people in personal evangelism. It could come through discipleship training, it comes through evangelism training, how to share your faith. You could use the existing ministries the church already has. The church has a food pantry, a clothes closet. They have events that they have, Fall Fest, all of these types of things, but making those things more intentional for the church in evangelism for really gospel and engagement. And then also phase 3 includes more community presence. That there's Hickory Day, there's a Loose Caboose Festival, there's all sorts of things that are going on in the community that the church should be a part of and visible at. And so it's moving from this inward maintenance, right, of we're making disciples, we're discipling our people, but ultimately it moves them out into how do we go out and reach people that are lost in the community. And so evaluation looks like a couple of different ways. That really it's measured in faithfulness to the Lord, that we're faithful in evangelism, we're faithful to the Word, obedient to the Lord, and then fruit. We will see fruit when there are people out engaging the lost. You will see baptism, you will see engagement, you will see new disciples. And so how you really measure those things and evaluate is it comes through looking at the ACP data every time it comes out, that we have that availability. You could do surveys in the church. How is this working? You can get a gauge on how things are going in the church from surveys, and really just ongoing conversations, asking people, is this change working, right? Or what are some things that might need to tweak, or what's going on here? And I think having those conversations would be wise. And so really the path forward for Hickory is just obedience and evangelism, and making sure that people are engaged in discipleship, which ultimately leads to being outward focused. So the path forward is faithfulness to the Word of God, and trusting God that He will bring fruit. we're faithful to Him, and really that fruit will come in His timing. So I appreciate you listening, and that's all I've got.